Today we come to one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Holy cow. I love this story. Let's check it out, shall we? So if you have a Bible with you, turn with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 12. And we will read verses 1 through 8. John 12, 1 through 8. And if you don't have a Bible with you today, that's okay. The verses are on the screen behind me. The Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the hometown of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So they hosted a dinner for Jesus there. Martha served, and Lazarus was among those, reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of expensive perfume, made of pure nard, and she anointed Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was going to betray him, asked, "Why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" Judas did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to take from what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "She has kept this perfume in preparation for the day of my burial. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me." This is God's word. There's nothing that goes to your heart quite like a story, especially a story like this one. And so what we have in this story is we have a banquet. Now, what is this banquet all about? Well, this is in Jesus' honor. That's why they're throwing this banquet, okay? Well, why are they doing that? Well, because if you were here last week, you remember in just the chapter before, in chapter 11, Jesus has done the climactic miracle of his ministry. He has raised his friend Lazarus from the dead. And now there's a banquet in his honor at somebody's home here in Bethany. Lazarus is there. Martha is there. She's the practical sister, you know. She's busy. She's a busy little bee, you know, Martha. Just serving everyone, working so hard, getting everything ready for everybody, you know. And then in comes the second sister, the other sister of Lazarus and Martha. And she does something so astonishing that it's hard to even get our heads around. This story is not only given here in John chapter 12, but also in Mark 14 and Matthew 26. And when you put all three of those together, you get a pretty complete picture of all that happened here at this banquet. First, Mary comes in the room with a pint of perfume. Now, this is not a bit surprising to anyone. No one even blinked at this. Why? Well, it's because back in those days, when you came into a big banquet, when you came to a big event, it was perfectly normal to get out the perfume or the ointment. Why would you do that? Well, it's kind of obvious when you think about it. These are the days, friends, before indoor plumbing, before showers, before deodorant. And I don't know if you've ever been to Israel, but it's a pretty hot climate over there. And that means lots and lots of stank. Stank. This is before toothbrushes. This is before toothpaste. Come on, y'all. Everybody smelled bad. Everybody. And you're like, well, wait a minute. You know, back in those days, you know, they were used to the stink. They could handle it. No, they couldn't. No, they couldn't. By our standards, they stank. And by their standards, they stank. What do you think the perfume's for? That's because they weren't used to it. No. And so therefore, it was extremely normal for any occasion for someone to bring out the perfume. Very, very normal. It happened at almost every occasion like this. Now, this particular perfume that Mary brought in, it was called nard, and this is very, very strong. Very strong. It would last a really long time because really it was so strong, all you had to do was use a tiny little dab of it. That's all you needed. It's very strong, okay? And so when you would come in the house for the banquet, the host or the hostess, they would just dab a tiny little bit on your head or your neck or something like that, and that would do the trick. It was so powerful that even that tiny drop there would just envelop you in a protective shield, so to speak, of just wonderful aroma and fragrance. Just needed a tiny little bit. And so really, you couldn't have a pleasant banquet unless you had perfume. You had to have it. And so, Mary walks in the room with the perfume. And what does everyone think? Everyone thinks, oh, great. Whew, Mary's here with the perfume. Oh, thank God, I was about to pass out. This old boy next to me is rough. He's rough. Whew, thank you, Mary. I've been waiting a long time for that, Mary. Come on, bring it over here. Bring it over here, Mary. Thank God. Just in time. But what Mary does with the perfume is so startling, so scandalous, that we're still talking about it thousands of years later. Thousands of years. If you go to Mark chapter 14, there's an amazing statement there about this scene. It says about the whole room, it says, they rebuked her harshly. And really, that's an understatement. It's an understatement. Because the Greek word there in Mark 14 for rebuked harshly is a word that means to bellow with anger, to snort or to roar like a bull. It's actually the same word from last week in chapter 11 that's used when Jesus approaches the tomb of Lazarus. Remember how we said Jesus was raging with fury at the tomb of Lazarus? This house was raging with fury at Mary. You know, as I was studying this week, I realized that this never occurred to me before. It never occurred to me that what she did was so outrageous, so shameful to the people who were there, so disgusting, so offensive, that pretty much the whole house started yelling at her. Now, what did she do that caused such a reaction? Let's go through them one by one. She did three things. Point number one in your outline, Mary broke the box. Mary broke the box. This is pretty darn significant. Pretty shocking. Look at verse 3 with me. Verse 3. Verse 3, then Mary took about a pint of expensive perfume made of pure nard, and she anointed Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Now, this verse doesn't say it, but Mark's gospel tells us that she broke the box at this point. She broke it. And when you break the box, well, you're not getting just a little dab, are you? No. It's all coming out. the whole thing. When you break the container, it means you're using the entire contents of the container. And so it wasn't just that she gave Jesus just a little dab. No. She gave him the whole shebang-a-bang. And that's why the verse tells us that the whole house was filled with the fragrance. They could probably smell it a few houses over, actually. Now, one reason this was so astounding was this perfume, this pure nard, was extremely expensive. Extremely. As Judas says here in the text, it was a year's wages. It's worth a year's wages. And so one commentator I read on the Gospel of John, he says this, he says, quote, "Unless these were unbelievably wealthy people, unless Mary and Martha and Lazarus were members of a hugely wealthy family, this would have easily been their most valuable possession." End quote. But not only that. Mark tells us that this was an alabaster box. What does that mean? It means this was almost certainly a family heirloom that had been passed down for who even knows how many generations. And this alabaster box was essentially the financial security of that family. How so? Well, back in those days, things could happen to cause tremendous financial turmoil. So even if war broke out, and there was absolutely no way for the family to make any money, no way to make a livelihood, this family would not starve for one reason and one reason only. What was that? They had an alabaster box. The alabaster box was their hedge against disaster. And therefore, probably, when they first saw Mary coming in the room with this thing, the family thought, yes, of course, the perfume. But hey, be careful with that thing, Mary. Be careful with that thing. That's our livelihood. And is she careful with it? No, she's not. Look at what she does with it. The first thing she does when she sees Jesus is she breaks the alabaster box. And she pours its entire contents out on Jesus. That's the first amazing thing Mary does with the perfume. The second amazing thing she does, this is point number 2, is she poured it on Jesus' feet. She poured it on his feet. Again, we've got a hot climate with no showers, no soap. What do you think people's feet were like? It doesn't take a lot of imagination to know what their feet were like. They were terribly nasty. Dealing with feet in the ancient Near East was so unbelievably demeaning, so unbelievably humiliating, that only slaves would wash the feet of others. Only slaves. That's the second thing Mary does. with the perfume. And the third incredible thing, this is point number 3 in your outline, Mary wiped his feet with her hair. Why is this so incredible? Well, friends, in order for her to do this, she had to let down her hair. She would have unbound her hair in public, which would have sent shockwaves around the home. This was considered a complete scandal in the first century. That's why everyone screamed at her. I can imagine somebody yelling at her, "Where is your sense of decency? Your sense of proportion?" Mary seems like an absolute lunatic here. But is she? Is she a lunatic? Well, it turns out that she's the only person in the room thinking rationally about Jesus. She's the only one. Someone yells, "Where's your sense of proportion?" And Jesus responds, saying, actually, her sense of proportion is exactly correct. Exactly correct. Why? Because Mary is the only person in the home with a clear understanding of two things. Number one, who Jesus is. And number two, what he's come to do. She's the only person there who knows this. And therefore, she's the only person there who knows what Jesus is worth. She's the only person there. Let's dive a little deeper into the three things that she did so I can show you this. First of all, when she breaks the alabaster box and pours it all out, what is she saying by doing that? This is the most expensive thing she owns, her most valuable possession, her hedge against disaster. And she breaks it for Jesus. What's she saying when she does that? She's saying this. She's saying, "Lord, I'm going to follow you, and I will not be conditioned by cost." In other words, I'm not going to say, "Well, I'll become a Christian as long as it doesn't cost me too much. I'll follow you, Lord, as long as it profits me in some way, as long as it helps my marriage and helps my savings account, helps my status in the community, help me find some friends." No. What is she saying? She's saying, "I give you anything. I give you everything. Not because you commanded it of me, but because that's what you're worth." That's number one. Number two, when she goes to Jesus' feet, now she's going even further. In the ancient world, you see, if a Jewish person fell into debt and they couldn't pay their debts, well, there's no such thing as bankruptcy back then. So what they had to do was go into servitude. Okay? And in servitude, they lost most of their rights. So they had to go to work in order to pay off their debt. But the Jewish rabbis said this, and rightly so. They said this. They said, if you have a Jewish servant, there are some things you can't ask that servant to do. They do give up most of their rights, but not all of their rights. And wouldn't you know it? Would you like to know what the rabbi said, one thing you cannot ask your servants to do? You cannot ask them to wash your feet. The rabbi said you're not allowed to have a Jewish servant wash your feet. That's the reason why the disciples, of course, coming up in John 13, are absolutely aghast when Jesus bends down to wash their feet. The idea of someone doing this, someone demeaning themselves in this way, that's unthinkable. It's appalling. But look at Mary. What is she saying by washing his feet? She's saying this. She's saying, I know even servants here in our culture have rights. But I relinquish my rights to you, Lord. I give up my rights. I'm not going to follow you conditioned by control. I don't want control. And I'm not going to follow you demanding my rights. I don't care about my rights. I give up my rights for you. Why? Because that's what you're worth. You're worth it. And number three, and I think most amazing of all, is when she lets down her hair. By doing that, she goes even further. Even further. Why was everyone in the house so scandalized by this? Well, the rabbis said this. They said, if a married woman lets down her hair in public, it's grounds for divorce. Her husband can rightfully divorce her. If any woman lets down her hair, it was considered a scandal. But why? Well, in the ancient world, when a woman would unbind her hair, the rabbi said this is a way of showing openness. This is a way of showing love. This is a way of showing intimacy. And it should only be done in private. For your husband only. That's what this meant in that culture. And so, do you see what Mary's doing when she does this? She's saying to Jesus, not only am I going to give you everything I have, and not only am I going to relinquish my rights, I love giving you everything. I love relinquishing my rights to you. This is not duty. This is intimacy. I'm giving you my heart, Lord. This is amazing, friends. It's why we're still talking about it. Now, when it comes to religion, I get it. Some of you in this room right now might be thinking, Mary's a freak. Like she's a religious loon. She's a fanatic. But let me make a clear argument to you right now, friend. No, she's not. And why do I say that? I could say that with full confidence that she's not a religious fanatic. Why? Because religion cannot produce this. It cannot. Why do you think Matthew, Mark, and John show us her being harshly rebuked? Who do you think's rebuking her? Who's rebuking her? Who's disgusted by her? Who's offended by her? The religious people. That's who. See, friends, this is not religious fanaticism. Religious people look at her and they are very upset with her. Why? Well, again, the whole thing bothers them, but I think it's mainly her hair. It's her hair. You see, religious people never let their hair down. They keep it all bobby pins, it's real tight. They never let their hair down. You see, Mary letting her hair down shows that she is completely confident in Jesus' presence. She's completely comfortable and free. Completely. But religious people never feel like that before God. They can't. Why? Because religion is based entirely upon your own works, your own efforts, and therefore you're never really sure where you stand before God. Religion is always working, doing, trying to get God's blessing and approval. It's always trying to be good, always trying to do what's right, always trying to earn it. And so when religious people see Mary letting her hair fly, it makes them mad as a bull. They frankly don't understand it. They're like, Mary's lost it, guys. She's lost it. Her cheese slid off her cracker. She's lost it. See, they can't comprehend what Mary's doing. How could she be this confident? How could she be this free? You're not supposed to be that free. You're not supposed to be that comfortable around God. But you know what? It's not just her confidence before Jesus that bothers them. They're astounded at how she doesn't care what the culture thinks either. She doesn't care. They're flabbergasted at the fact that she doesn't care what Martha thinks. I've always thought it was very merciful of the gospel writers not to tell us what Martha's reaction was to this scene. Notice it's absent. It's absent from all three of the Gospels there that tell the story. Y'all know what Martha said, don't you? She said, Mary, have you lost your mind? But Mary doesn't give a rat's rear what Martha thinks. She doesn't care what the culture thinks. She doesn't care what the men think. She only cares what Jesus thinks. And she's absolutely sure what he thinks about her. And if he is for me, who can be against me? She knows that he loves her and forgives her unconditionally. No strings attached. She knows that. But religion, Religion knows nothing about any of that. Religion puts string after string after string after string attached to your forgiveness. Religion doesn't know anything about this kind of intimacy, this letting down the hair. Now, religious people pray a lot, sure. That's good. They're praying for all their needs. That's fine. They pray for the needs of the world. That's great. They pray for their family's needs, their church's needs, their country's needs. All great things. But here's one thing they don't do in prayer. They don't give personally lavish worship. They don't do it because they don't know anything about that. To them, God is a boss. He's just a boss. He's the white-bearded, mean-faced manager in the sky. Arms folded. Glasses down. He's the cosmic cop, ready to write sin tickets at a moment's notice. He's making a list and checking it twice. He's going to find out who's naughty or nice. See, if you're a religious person, then you need to watch closely your own P's and Q's, while simultaneously looking down your nose at the sinners next door. Why? All to try and convince yourself that you're a good person and that God is pleased with you. But don't you see? Mary doesn't have to do any of that, because she's already convinced that Jesus is pleased with her. She's already convinced. She doesn't break her alabaster box to earn his favor. She breaks her alabaster box because she already has his favor. She knows it. But how? How does she know it? How can she be so convinced that there's no strings attached? Well, actually, Jesus tells you. You might have missed it, but it's right here in the text. Jesus tells you how she's so convinced. Look at verse 7. Verse 7. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. She has kept this perfume in preparation for the day of my burial. Now this is amazing. It's amazing. Somehow, Mary knew Jesus was going to die. How could she know that? Well, we actually don't know for sure how she knew. So some scholars, I've got several commentaries on John, so some commentators say that God might have just told her directly. The Holy Spirit might have just told her, like whispered it to her and talked to her directly about the substitutionary atonement that is coming. And, well, hey, maybe, I'm open to that the Spirit just straight up told her, but I actually don't think that's what happened personally. I don't think that's very likely. The text never says anything like that. We don't get that from the text, from any of the Gospels. And so how did she know then? Well, here's what I think. Take it or leave it. Well, here's what I think. Just going based off the text, just going based off of the stories that we know, all right? Every time you see Mary in any of the Gospels, where is she? She's at the feet of Jesus. Every stinking time. She's at Jesus' feet, just soaking in every word. listening, learning, and reflecting on everything he says. And so here's what I think. I think Mary's simply ahead of everybody else. While Martha's been a busy little bee in the kitchen, where's Mary? Sitting at the feet of Jesus, just soaking it all in, soaking it in. See, Martha's missed it because she was a busy little bee. Hair all tight. But not Mary. Mary's only concern was Jesus. And so I think she just understands him more than everyone else does. I think she's picking up what he's laying down. And so, what's interesting is we see at the very end of the last chapter, John chapter 11, that after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, this is what we read here in John, at the end of John 11. I'll read it for you. John says, "Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary," see that? Come to visit Mary, had seen what Jesus did, put their faith in him. But some of them who had gone to visit Mary, right? Some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. And so from that day on, they plotted to take his life. So here's what I think happened. I think at this moment, a light bulb went off for Mary. I think at this time she realized that Jesus' raising of Lazarus triggered his own death. And she also knows him well enough to know that he knows this too. Which means what? He's doing it willingly. He's doing it willingly. And so, because of the light bulb moment, Mary does the only rational thing she can think to do. She comes to this banquet with her alabaster box. And by breaking it, this is what she's saying. She's saying, "Lord, I get it now. I get it. I realize the only way you could have raised Lazarus was to bury yourself. I realize if you're going to give us life, you're going to have to lose yours. I can't believe the sacrifice you're making, but I see it. I see you." And friends, she's the only person who does. She's the only person who sees him. So you say, well, how can Mary pour out her treasure on Jesus? It's because she knows who he is. And she knows what he's done. And therefore, she knows his worth. She knows his worth. He's worth everything. Her heart has been melted by the understanding of who he is and what he's done for her. Of course, she knew before this that he'd forgiven her of her many, many sins. She knew that. But now she knows the cost. She knows what it cost him. And she makes the only rational decision she can. It's to give him everything. Because she knew it was going to cost Jesus his life to forgive her. And so, friends, religion can't produce devotion like Mary's. But the gospel can. Love can. His radical love for her has awakened her radical love for him. What does Paul say? We love because he first loved us. See? And you say, but what about me here today? What about me? Well, friend, I have great news for you. Wonderful news for you. Jesus loves and forgives you just the same as he did Mary. And friend, it cost him everything. Just the same to love and forgive you. He had to lay down his life so that you could pick up yours. And you know what the amazing thing is? He did it willingly. He volunteered for this. He did it willingly, friend. Just for you.